This is Alan Seaborn from Winning at Home. Welcome to In Progress, a podcast about faith, life, and how we grow. And again, as you can hear from how good this sounds compared to how the last handful of whatever, 10 or however many I did at home on my phone recordings. This one I'm recording, I'm back in the studio and it feels good, back in kind of the old normal routine. It doesn't feel normal quite yet, but I think we're all in that spot still. Maybe for some people, you ease right back into your schedule from pre-COVID and it felt just totally normal. Maybe some of you who have essential roles, your schedule never really changed all that much. It just got a lot more prep heavy, a lot more. You had to be conscientious of all these different things as you were going about your normal schedule. It was normal with a whole bunch of extra work mixed in there for you. But I'm kind of still transitioning back into it. Right now is a bad time to have allergies, and my cars are constantly covered in pollen. And so I do have a little cough here, which I always feel, when I cough, I feel like guilty or like I'm betraying everybody, like that I am here with an allergy. But anyway, so that's just kind of the world and the challenges, and that's not really a challenge, but you know what I'm saying, that we're all navigating, and the little hiccups as we're getting back into regular life. But hopefully things continue moving in the right direction, and cases don't spike or cases don't climb as we move back to, with a lot of precautions, but move back to a little bit more normal version of life. And I know that we're all hoping for that. We're all doing what we can to be safe and to keep the people around us safe. But we'll see what happens, and kind of moving into the future. We're taking it a week at a time, right? So that's really kind of just what was on my mind right now as I'm sitting down to record. That's not a clever setup for what I'm going to be talking about. This transition is not a smooth one at all, because what I want to read is from Proverbs chapter 23, and I'm going to read verses 4 and 5, and Proverbs 22, 23, 24, and I can't remember if it goes into 25 or not, but is broken down into these 2, 3, 4 verse at a time little sayings. And so there are, I think it's 30 total little sayings, and they're kind of each divided up into a couple or a few or several verses. And what, it's interesting, because really we think of Proverbs, all of it, as little groupings of sayings. But in this, the author of Proverbs, which is Solomon, King Solomon, and I think there's some debate around whether some of the things are definitely written by Solomon and then some were written by others. But toward the end of Proverbs like this, we have this section where there's just these little sayings and these just little fragments, and then it kind of jumps to a new idea, jumps to a new idea, jumps to a new idea. And in Proverbs chapter 23, verses 4 and 5, this is saying 8 of the 30 sayings that are through these chapters. Solomon writes, "Do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone. for they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. And maybe that kind of seems like a strange thing to record a podcast episode about, but as I read, really that first little line there just really grabbed me. Verse 4, do not wear yourself out to get rich. And I've got to be honest. So what I do when I read through scripture is I think about, okay, how would this hit me hearing this from the specific author who's writing this? And Solomon, he was, the wisest and the richest ruler at the time that he was alive. And I think, probably you could say the wisest ruler, period. I'm guessing that by this point, someone, probably Jeff Bezos, has surpassed his wealth. But, when I read that line, he says, do not wear yourself out to get rich. I can kind of read it in a little bit of a cynical way of like, well, Solomon didn't wear himself out to get rich. He was born the son of the king, and then he took over as king. So he definitely didn't wear himself out to get rich. So what is he saying here? Like, don't work really hard? But that's not what he's talking about. And that becomes clear as we read the rest of this saying, the next part of that verse and then the following verse. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they're gone. Now, that's an interesting line, again, knowing this is written by King Solomon. He was unbelievably wealthy. And so I'm like, what does that mean? Cast but a glance at riches and they're gone. Because his riches wouldn't have been gone. He never went broke. He never struggled financially from the time he became king and was just immensely wealthy. So what is he talking about? And as I sat with that line, I started thinking through how that looks for us. And I've told this story before, that when I started my first job where I was getting a paycheck, I worked at a golf course, and in the back of my mind, I thought, okay, when I can get $1,000 saved up, then I'm going to really feel like I made it. And I've told that I remember $1,173 and something cents. I got the statement from my bank, and that's how much was in there. And I was just so happy and satisfied, and like I had achieved what I had set out to achieve for just a small window of time, like 10 seconds. And then I thought, oh, well, that didn't do it. I wonder if $2,000 will do it. And when I think about Solomon writing the line, cast but a glance at riches and they're gone, I kind of think that's more where he's coming from. I mean, we can definitely relate to how many of us, the economic stimulus check that just came, for those of you who live in the United States, we know what that feels like. You cash that check or you deposit it, and before you know it, it's gone. Whether it was spent on necessities and it really was serving the, a big part of the purpose that those checks were sent out in the first place for those of us who were laid off or those who were in a tough financial spot pre-COVID, and it was just amplified by unexpected loss of income, unexpected loss of business at your place of business, and all those things. Or whether it was spent on something else where we were like, hey, I've been able to stay working during this, but I've got an idea. I've been wanting to do this or buy this or get this or fix this. And we know that stuff, money comes and goes, right? Cast but a glance at riches and they're gone. They'll surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. And because of that, the first line that Solomon says makes sense. Don't wear yourself out to get rich. Don't spend all the precious energy and time and life that we have chasing after something that is not permanent, something that does not satisfy, and something that we aren't able to rely on. I was messaging back and forth with a friend of mine recently. I think it was, as I'm recording this, it was earlier this week. I think it was a couple days ago. And he lives internationally, and his country's on a different timeline than ours for reopening and different things like that. And he was saying that his job and his income is based on events and having people gathering together. And we're messaging back and forth about that. And I was saying, obviously, that's a really tough time to have your role based entirely on that. And he said something, I'm not even remembering exactly what it was, but it was something like, yeah, but God's faithful. And I was just reminded in that moment of, my mind was going to, man, he really needs to be able to get that income. Where is he going to make up for that? How is that going to happen? What's that going to look like? And his mind was going to, yeah, but God's faithful. And as I recorded early on in this shutdown, a lot of the things that we trusted in, a lot of the things that we relied on, were immediately shown to be not worth trusting in, not worth relying on. And that is what Solomon is getting at here in Proverbs chapter 23 with this saying about wealth and riches, that if this is what you're building your life toward, if this is what you're hoping is going to bring fulfillment and satisfaction and peace and stability, it's not. And this was a man who was unbelievably wealthy beyond imagination. He didn't need to struggle for money. And what he's saying here is, hey, money, it's not going to satisfy on that deep level. Now, as I record this and as I think about just the real world implications of some things, money does solve some problems, right? If your problem is, hey, I need to pay this bill, hey, I need to pay for this surgery, hey, I need to, not feel the stress and the weight of all these payments that need to be made. But it doesn't do more than that. It doesn't actively bring peace. It doesn't actively bring happiness. It doesn't actively bring health and wholeness. What does those things is putting our trust in, to use the language that Solomon uses here, to wear ourselves out chasing after God, pursuing him with all is what brings peace and satisfaction and fulfillment. Peace and satisfaction and fulfillment that aren't based on circumstances. Paul talks about that. I think it's in Philippians, where he says, he's found the secret of being content in the midst of whatever he was going through. And he found that, and the only place we'll find that is in trusting in God, in surrendering to him, and in saying, God, what I'm pursuing more than anything else in the world, more than status, more than wealth, more than achievement, more than anything, is you. Because this other stuff, as Solomon said, cast but a glance at riches and they're gone. This other stuff doesn't last forever. This other stuff isn't permanent. This other stuff comes and goes, but not God, not his word, not his work in our lives, and not his peace that he brings. So instead of chasing after stuff that's not going to satisfy, stuff that's not going to last, let's instead put our trust in him, pursue him as our sense of peace and fulfillment and contentment, as our foundation, as the one that we can trust in. Because if we're pursuing other things, we're going to be disappointed. We're going to get what we wanted and find out it doesn't get us what we actually were hoping it was going to get us. That can only be found in him. So let's stop looking around at places and things and people who can't provide what God freely offers us. And instead, let's lean on him, let's trust in him, and let's find that peace, that foundation, that stability that we're chasing in a whole bunch of different directions, but that can only be found in him.